On Giving Thanks by St. Basil the Great. You have heard the apostle's saying, which he taught to the Thessalonians as a rule for all of life. Indeed, the teaching is for everyone. Whatever their condition in life, the prophet extends to all humankind. Rejoice always, he says, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. What joy consists of, what profit comes from it, how one can apply the duty to pray without a gap, and thank God for everything. This we will now describe in detail. And we must also refute the objection of the adversary, who here blasphemes by insisting that this teaching is impossible to perform. What good is it, such a doubter asks, to spend the time, night and day, cheerful and merry in spiritual mind games? How can these be possible when we are surrounded by a multitude of unanticipated troubles that give the soul inevitable grief, whereby it is all the more impossible to rejoice and be cheerful? Should we be like one who is being roasted on a gridiron and perceives no pain, or being goaded and feels no torment? Perhaps someone here today, in the sickness of his mind, is seeking a pretext for sin, and dares, because of his laziness in observing the commandment of the lawgiver, to cast blame by suggesting that these things are impossible. How is it possible, he is thinking, for me to rejoice always, especially as joy is caused by external circumstances and does not rest with us? After all, joy results from the arrival of friends, extended time with parents, discovery of some treasure, public honor, recovery from severe illness, and anything else that makes for a happy life: a well-supplied house, an abundant table, merry and companionable friends, agreeable sounds and spectacles, health of close relatives, and other signs of life's success. And that which distresses us is not just what happens to our own life, but also what befalls friends and relations. These also contribute to whether the soul is happy and cheerful. We also want to see our enemy fail, the downfall of the persecutor, fair dealings with our benefactor, and that no unexpected mishap provoke or alarm our life. Then the soul can rest joyful. Why are we given a command to observe that does not depend on the will, but on these other circumstances? How can I, moreover, pray without ceasing when all of life's needs and wants make a necessary claim on the soul's attention, when it is impossible for the soul to address two concerns at the same time? And further, to give praise in all things is going a bit too far for me, he continues. Should I give thanks when someone tortures me, whips me stretched out on a wheel, rips out my eyes? Should I give thanks when my persecutor dishonors me with ill treatment? When I am dying of cold, consumed with hunger, bound to the rack, deprived of children or spouse? Should I give thanks when shipwreck suddenly strips me of goods, or when I am beset by pirates on the sea, or highway robbers on the road? Give thanks when I am damaged by false accusations, wanderings, housed in prison? By complaints such as these and many others, the lawgiver's accuser seeks to justify his sins, even going so far as slander, claiming that the teaching we are giving is impossible to accomplish. How do we respond? I say that such an argument is quite contrary to the vision of the apostle, whose intention is to raise up our soul, which is now creeping about in a sinful fog, rolling on the earth and in the flesh like a worm in the mud, failing to appreciate the lawgiver's exalted mind to a heavenly way of life. He not only invites those who are enjoying what is good to rejoice always, but also those who no longer live in the flesh, in whom Christ lives, who for the highest good permit no association with the burdens of the flesh. Indeed, should their flesh suffer, the afflictions of the body could not have any effect on the soul. If we kill these earthly members by the apostles' teaching and bear the death of Jesus Christ in our life, the wounds that would kill the body do not spread to the soul, its association having been severed. And thus it is that insult, punishment, death of relatives cannot trample the spirit nor upend the lofty soul into suffering. Those in this frame of mind who are pulled into some distress will have little sorrow as they endure painful misfortune. But those who live according to the flesh are to be pitied, not for their misfortune, but because they did not choose to do what they ought. A perfect soul, once it has been touched by the desire for its Creator, will rejoice here and now in a beauty, joy, and delight not shaken by the twists and turns of sinful desire. In fact, what causes others grief will only strengthen the joy of such a person. This was the mind of the apostle, who rejoiced in weakness, distress, beatings, violence, boasting in what made him weak, in hunger and thirst, in cold and nakedness, in persecution and anguish, what was unbearable to others, and made them weary of life. Indeed, the ones who do not know and share the apostle's conviction with his admonition to the gospel life dare to complain against Paul, saying that this command is impossible for us. They must learn how many opportunities God's generosity offers us to a reasonable joy. He has called us into existence out of nothing, created in his image, our nature made perfect, giving us the sense and reason by which we perceive God. Let us attentively consider the beauty of creation, reading it in large letters, what great providence of God and his wisdom over all things. We are capable of distinguishing good from evil, and can learn from nature to choose what is useful and to turn away what will do us harm. Alienated from God by sin, we are liberated from shameful servitude through the blood of the only begotten. From this we have the hope of the resurrection, participation in the goodness of the angels, and a comprehension that is beyond anything we might be able to put into words. How can anyone deny that these are cause for perpetual joy and contentment, but suppose instead that the pleasure-filled life belongs to the one who serves the belly, delights in music, and rolls around and snores in bed? I would go so far as to say that reasonable people should pity the sort of person who lives for the present. Blessed, rather, are those who exchange the present for the hope of the life to come. When with God, whether we are sitting in flames like the 3 young men in Babylon, locked up with lions, or swallowed by a sea monster, we must nonetheless give praise, rejoicing and not mourning over the present, but be merry in the hope of what is to come. Equipped for holy combat, I must endure the assaults of the enemy in expectation of glory, looking forward to the immortal crown. The one who has undergone gymnastic training will not be disheartened in the arena when he gets hit, but will immediately attack the opponent, despising momentary affliction in order to be named the champion. So also, when those who love virtue encounter something unpleasant, it will not hinder their joy. For suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint us. Therefore the apostle exhorts us, in another place, to rejoice in hope in distress. It is hope that produces a soul rejoicing in virtue. The same apostle exhorts us to weep with those who weep, and in the letter to the Galatians he mourned the enemies of the cross of Christ. And need we mention that Jeremiah wept, and Ezekiel mourned for those who suffered God's punishment? Woe is me, my mother, that you bore me. Woe is me, for the faithful have disappeared from the land, and there is no one left who is upright. And woe is me, for I have become like one who gathers straw at the harvest. Examine closely all these sayings of the righteous, and you will be convinced that they all scorn the world and life's misery. Woe is me that my pilgrimage endures so long. Paul demands to be released from this life and be with Christ. He laments the extension of this journey in life as a hindrance to joy. David, in his psalm, laments over the death of his friend Jonathan, at the same time also lamenting his enemy. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan, and daughters of Israel weep over Saul. He mourns by name him who was killed in sin, and Jonathan while he was his lifelong best friend. What need do we have for further examples? The Lord wept over Lazarus and over Jerusalem. And he blesses those who mourn, and also those who weep. But, you ask, how do we reconcile this with the command to rejoice always? Tears and joy do not always come from the same source. Tears arise from something unexpected that strikes the soul and stuns it, constricting the breath around the heart. In joy the soul leaps, exulting in some thought, both imprint themselves differently on the body. Sorrow creates a pallor, appearing pale as lead and cold. Joy, on the other hand, creates a blooming, rosy appearance, as if the soul cannot be contained, but it's pressing to burst out. From this we can say that the complaints and tears of the holy ones arise out of love for God. They see always the beloved, and this increases their joy. In sympathy with their fellow servants, they experience sorrow when they sin, and correct them through their tears. Those who stand on the shore have sympathy for those who are shipwrecked, but without putting their own safety in danger by their concern. It is the same way with one who grieves over the sins of his neighbors, but without losing his own joy. In fact, tears over the brother reap the joy of the Lord. Blessed are those who weep, and blessed are those who lament, for they will be comforted and they will laugh. It is called laughter, but it is not that which bursts forth out of red and engorged cheeks. Rather, it is pure cheerfulness, unhampered by sorrow. The apostle permits us to weep with those who weep, because one such tear is like a seed and pledge of eternal joy. Lift up your mind with me and consider the life of the angels, whether it is not composed of genuine joy and delight, seeing that they stand before God and enjoy the inexpressible beauty and magnificence of our Creator. It is to this life that the apostle encourages us, while ordering us to rejoice always. But as for the Lord, weeping over Lazarus and the city, we say this: He also ate and drank, not because he needed to, but in proportion and limit, that you might renounce the natural sensations of the soul. He also wept, that those who are disposed to immoderate sorrow might regulate their lamentation and tears. For if our tears are to be in reasonable moderation, it is necessary to assess the circumstances, who, how, when, and in what manner they are fitting. Thus the Lord wept without excessive passion as an example for us, adding these words: Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him. Who among us bewails a sleeping friend, one he believes will shortly awaken? Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came to life, and the bound one walked forth. Wonder of wonders, the feet were bound with cloth wraps, yet unhindered from coming forward. The power was greater than the constriction. How now should the Lord, able to do such things, have valued lamentation of this event? Or is it not obvious that he always commands proportion and purpose to the natural sensations, to help accommodate our weakness? He did not express emotion like some wild animal. He disdains immoderate lamentation and weeping as something base. Therefore, in his grief over his friend, he proves his participation in human nature, not permitting that we should surrender ourselves to the grosser weakness of affection, nor that we should let some sorrowful occurrence make us senseless. In the same way, the Lord was able also to perceive hunger and thirst, his muscles and sinews experiencing weariness with the extensions of his travels, without him being in any way moved in his divinity, since it was the body that was susceptible to influence according to its nature. In the same way, he also produced tears, permitting to the flesh that which corresponded to its nature. For tears are caused when sorrow fills the cavities in the head with vapor, and the accumulated moisture is propelled out through the canals of the eyes. If we hear unexpected distressing news, it causes a ringing in the head, dizziness, dimmed vision, the head trembling from the vapors that are being pressed out as a result of the accumulated internal heat. That which has been blocked up is released, and thick vapors distilled into tears as rain comes from clouds. This is how the person who weeps out of grief experiences a sort of pleasure in tears, as the internal pressure is relieved. Daily experience confirms this. We know from the example of many who are struck with terrible misfortune but who hold back the force of their tears, that many afterwards suffer incurable illness, paralyzed even to death by the blows they experienced. Deprived of relief, their strength was broken as a consequence of their sorrow. It is like fire that suffocates when the smoke is not allowed to draw, that this also happens when the life force, unable to exhale, is extinguished as a result of grief. This is why those who are prone to sorrow must not use the Lord's tears as an excuse for their passions. The fact that the Lord enjoyed food is no excuse for our gourmet tastes, but rather defines for us the outermost boundaries allowed for abstinence and frugality. So, too, his tears don't mean that we must weep, but rather provide us with a suitable measure and prescribe a specific principle, that we remain within the proper bounds of nature and the manner in which we suffer distress. Neither women nor men are permitted to weep beyond what is due. One may grieve over misfortune and weep to a certain degree, in a tempered way, without loud complaints and screams, without tearing the clothing or strewing oneself with ashes, or doing any other unseemly things not in accord with what is taught about the things of heaven. For the one who is refined through godly teaching must act from right reason, as if guarded by a wall that wards off the passions through courage and constancy, and not like someone in a ditch who permits the sorrowful and effeminate soul to let loose a swarm of passions. Such a weak soul indeed derives no strength from hope in God, but permits itself to be crushed down and overcome with misfortune. As worms are produced in soft wood, so also melancholy is fostered by the soft human feelings. Did Job have a heart as hard as a diamond? Were his guts made of stone? He lost 10 of his children in a brief moment, who were annihilated at one blow while enjoying themselves in a beautiful house, when Satan caused the place to fall down in ruins. He saw the table sprinkled with blood. He saw the children of different ages, but sharing in a common fate. And yet he did not lament, tear out his hair, or curse. Instead, he spoke those renowned and universally acclaimed words of thanksgiving. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Was he a man without any sympathy? Can this be? For it says about Job that he wept over all those in affliction. Was he lying? Not at all. It testifies truly about him who was true above all other virtues. The man, it says, was blameless, righteous, godly, and true. But you, on the other hand, serve yourselves with mournful songs full of lamentations, and you seek to soften your soul through such dirges. In addition to this, just as an actor alters his posture and dress while on stage, so you think you must show your grief with a particular appearance: black clothing, torn hair, a dark house, dirt, dust, and keening, perpetually picking at the wounds of sorrow in the soul. The one given over to such a display has no hope. But you are above such theatricals, since you are taught about the one who has fallen asleep in Christ, that what is sown is perishable, but what is raised is imperishable. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in strength. It is sown a physical body, it is raised a spiritual body. Why are you lamenting over someone who has simply changed his clothes? You need not lament as if you have lost all help for your life. As it is written, it is better to hope in the Lord than to hope in man. You need not bemoan the dead like one struck with some terrible blow. The celestial trumpet will soon wake him, and you will see him appear before the throne of Christ. Away, too, with every vulgar and coarse exclamation, "Oh, what unexpected disaster!" Who would have believed that this could happen? How could I thought that someone I loved so dearly would end up buried in the dirt? We ought to blush if we hear such things. We need only to remember the past as well as present experience to know that we cannot escape misfortune. For these reasons, we should never be crushed by either untimely death or by the occurrence of some unexpected unpleasantness. If we are truly God-fearing, I had a son, you say. He was my only heir, my security for my old age, the pride of my family, the best of his peers, to support of his house. He stood in the bloom of his age. This one death is taken from me. He, who such a short time ago spoke so beautifully, was the delight of his father's eye, has now become earth and dust. What should I do? Should I tear my clothing, roll about in the dirt, and complain and lament in the presence of others, and have a tantrum like some child who, receiving punishment, screams and kicks? Or should I consider the inevitability of such an event, that the law of death is unavoidable, that it strikes those of every age, gradually claiming all, that to be overcome in this way is nothing out of the ordinary, and not as one who lets his courage fail when hit with an unanticipated blow. Indeed, I had known long in advance that I, being mortal myself, had a mortal son, that nothing human will continue, and no property is held forever. Great cities renowned for their architecture and the might of their peoples, cities that excelled in wealth, land, and trade, now lie in ruins, everything once fine about them now buried in loss. Often, too, a ship, after weathering 1,000 storms, its capital entrusted with countless wares, is utterly wrecked by a single typhoon. Also a military force, one known for its victories when fortune shifts, is ruined in rumor and spectacular defeat. Indeed, whole nations and islands that have gained power over water and land, having amassed immense wealth, in the course of time either fall into ruin or are conquered, losing their freedom. In short, no evil can take place that has not already happened in the past. We compare weights by placing them in a balance, and discern the quality of gold by testing it with stone. In the same way, when we think about all that the Lord has ordained, we should not let ourselves respond beyond the boundaries of moderation. If you encounter something unpleasant, your spirit has been prepared, so that you need not be shaken up, the hope of things to come making light your present misfortune. Just as one with weak eyes turns them away from anything that is very bright, refreshing the vision with flowers and herbs, so also must your soul not stare at sorrow, fixating on present afflictions, but rather focus your eye on the true good. If you do this, you will come to that place where you rejoice always, that is to say, where your conduct is always right with God, and the hope of reward lightens life's distresses. Has someone insulted your honor? Well, then, turn your focus to the glory that is bequeathed in heaven for patience. Have you suffered a loss of your assets? Well, then, look to the wealth and treasure you have gathered in heaven through your good works. Are you deprived of your native land? Well, then, the heavenly Jerusalem is indeed your native land. Have you lost a child? Well, then, you have the angels, with whom you may gather around the throne of God and rejoice eternally. If you set present sufferings against future good, you will prove your soul firm in the face of sorrow and disturbance. As the command of the apostle admonishes, do not yield to immoderate joy when you have worldly success, nor let sorrow through dejection and alarm suppress your joy and good spirits. If you do, you have not been properly instructed as to life's proportions. You will never have a calm and storm-free life. You can bear it lightly when you have this teaching as your companion, the teaching that instructs you to perpetual joy. Cast off, therefore, the burdens of the flesh and take on the joy of the soul. In so doing, you will elevate yourself above earthly things and direct your spirit to the hope of eternal good, satiating the soul with joy, and maintaining angelic bliss in our hearts and Jesus Christ our Lord, to whom be glory and might unto eternity. Amen.